At the end of the previous part, we talked about Tim driving to the Research Institute again. He decided to go see the newly built fences, but Tim didn't know that the place was right on Luke's escape route. With the help of Maureen, Luke finally escaped from the back area of the Research Institute. He remembered her instructions. After passing the fence, he would go downstream. Maureen would meet Luke at the red stairs. However, the Research Institute's security was much stricter than they had imagined. Even though Luke had escaped the siege, the guard post was still set up at the turn ahead. Luke intended to sneak around, but the noise attracted the attention of the guards. Seeing the flashlight flashing from afar on the bridge, Luke took a deep breath and dove into the icy river. The guards on the bridge didn't detect anything unusual. Luke tried to hold his breath as much as possible. Only when Luke confirmed that the light had gone far away did he dare to raise his head. His clothes were soaked, but Luke didn't feel the slightest bit cold. The most important thing now was to avoid the guards and get to the red stairs to meet Maureen. Coincidentally, Tim had always felt that there was something wrong with this research institute, so he drove here in the middle of the night to investigate. He went to the red stairs, where the murder took place years ago, hoping to find some clues. Tim tried to follow the path of the victims. He followed the river and finally came to an empty lot. It seemed that something was buried underground. Tim dug and looked at the symbols on the wooden planks. He guessed that this was the wooden house where the 4 victims lived, but then it was completely buried underground. At this moment, his phone suddenly rang. It turned out to be a female colleague calling. Seeing that it was almost dawn, she wanted him to hurry back because she still needed the car tomorrow morning. Although Tim felt that there was something strange about cabin, he had to return the car because he had to return it. At the same time, in the Research Institute, Director Sigsbee finally found out the reason for the broken air conditioner. It was obvious that someone had deliberately sabotaged it, not an accident. Trevor also realized that there was a traitor among the staff because the children could not have come here by themselves. At this time, Maureen was preparing to leave work. The guard at the gate suddenly received a phone call. Trevor asked all the staff not to leave the Research Institute. Maureen felt that something was wrong, but she did not dare to rush out. Meanwhile, Sigsbee discovered a pair of scissors by the fence. They guessed that someone had escaped. Sigsbee thought that this was Trevor's carelessness, but unexpectedly, Trevor did not care at all because he was only responsible for the big boss behind him. In another development, Maureen used the excuse of cleaning to enter the director's office. Through the surveillance screen, she saw Sigsbee and Trevor searching for the origin of the scissors. That was the tool she had given Luke to escape. Maureen's worries finally came true. She knew that sooner or later the director would investigate her, so she immediately made a phone call. It was a news reporter she had known for a long time. Originally, Maureen planned to go to the red stairs after work, but now she could no longer escape, so she had to ask this reporter to pick up Luke. This female reporter named Ket was actually a spy planted by Trevor to deal with those who wanted to harm the Research Institute. Suddenly, the loudspeaker in the institute rang out, asking Maureen to immediately go to the maintenance room. At the same time, Luke had escaped the Research Institute's observation. When Luke was about to reach the red stairs, he accidentally met Tim on his way back. Luke instinctively thought that Tim came to arrest him, but Luke's body was too weak to run away anymore. Tim quickly said that he was the new policeman in town. Luke used his sensing skill to confirm that Tim was not lying, but Luke could not go with Tim at this time because he had to go to the red stairs to meet Maureen. Tim's curiosity was aroused. Tim felt that Luke was extremely mysterious. Luke kept mentioning the 2 words, Research Institute. Luke even mentioned the name Trevor, so Tim immediately expressed his attitude that he would do everything to help Luke. Luke felt that Tim was not lying, so he immediately told him all the crimes of the Research Institute. At first, Tim did not believe these words. How could there be someone in the world who possessed this strange ability? Luke immediately took out the USB. All the evidence was in here, but this had to be given to the journalist that Maureen mentioned. At the same time, Sigsbee was looking for Maureen everywhere. Sigsbee pushed open her office door and found Maureen doing something stupid. There were words written on the ground. "I'm waiting for you in hell." Trevor ran to report that Kate had received a call from Maureen. Maureen told Kate to go to the red stairs to pick up an escaped child, but Kate didn't know the child's name. Trevor thought Maureen was talking nonsense because he had confirmed that all the children in the front and back areas were in the hospital, but Sigsbee was still not reassured. She called to confirm again. The guard replied that all the children's GPS devices were within range. Sigsbee said she had to confirm it with her own eyes. All the guards in the hospital went into action. They checked the location of each child until they entered Luke's room. The GPS device showed that he was here, but they didn't see a single person. Sigsbee finally found the GPS device removed on the bed. Meanwhile, Tim and Luke had arrived at the highway. Tim wanted to take Luke to the police station first, but Luke still wanted to see Maureen. Luke suggested that Tim check his identity first. Tim opened the website on his phone and quickly found news about Luke's parents being murdered. Only then could Tim confirm that Luke was the kidnapped child. He didn't expect that the research institute was even more evil than he had imagined. Tim was about to call the police station to report it, but as soon as the phone was connected, the signal was suddenly cut off. Luke immediately realized that the research institute had blocked the communication. Luke's escape had definitely been discovered. Luke was worried that Maureen would be implicated, so he felt the need to go and tell her. Tim calculated the distance. This place was not far from the red staircase. Seeing that Luke was so determined, Tim agreed to go with him. At this time, Sigsbee had already called the security to handle Maureen's body. As for the funeral, it was completely unnecessary. Just put the body in the crematorium. The two of them stared at the phone, hesitating whether to report this to the boss behind the scenes. After all, this was the first prison break in the 70 years of the Institute's establishment. They definitely couldn't withstand the boss's wrath. In the end, the two of them discussed a countermeasure. They had to catch Luke before the boss knew about it. Trevor was very confident about this because he had already thought of a plan to capture Luke. Meanwhile, Luke and Tim had arrived at the red staircase. Unfortunately, Maureen was not there. Instead, the female reporter Kate was there. Tim had met Kate at the bar before. He was also very curious why she came here. Luke knew that Kate was the journalist that Maureen mentioned, so he appeared, but Luke quickly sensed that Kate seemed to be hiding something. Luke asked Maureen where she had gone. At that moment, Kate's phone rang. The two immediately realized that something was wrong. The phone signal here was blocked. Only authorized numbers could be used. It was clear that Kate was Trevor's henchman. At this point, Kate stopped pretending. She pulled out and asked Luke to return to the research institute with her. Luke immediately activated his ability to control a tree that fell straight from the sky. While Kate rolled to avoid him, Luke rushed forward and threw her into the stream under the rock. Luke realized that something had happened to Maureen, but now was not the time to pursue the matter. Tim decided to take Luke to the police station first. However, Luke was still uneasy because the power of the research institute was very great. Luke thought he should go to a big city to expose their crimes, but Tim trusted his police chief very much. Tim even told Luke to feel if he was lying. Luke sighed helplessly because what Tim saw might not be true. Meanwhile, Sigsbee had reached the red stairs outside the research institute. They found Kate's cell phone on a rock. Only then did they realize the plan to capture him had failed. Now Luke was missing. This matter would definitely reach the boss. Trevor hurriedly went to find the institute's number 2, but Trevor found him packing up to escape. Henry also felt the storm coming. The research institute might not be able to hold on any longer. However, Trevor was extremely calm and thought that if such a big incident happened, the director, the head, would definitely be responsible. As long as the two deputies like them formed an alliance and agreed on a statement, it would be completely possible to put all the blame on Sigsbee. Moreover, even if Henry escaped, the crimes he committed here would sooner or later be exposed. At this time, Tim had brought Luke to the town police station. When faced with the police chief's question, Luke only took out the USB that Maureen left for him. All the evidence of the research institute's crimes were inside. However, none of them realized that a police officer had sneaked out and called Trevor. This was the video that the cleaning lady had exchanged her life for. The evidence was now displayed on the police station's computer screen, silently denouncing the heinous crimes of the research institute. After watching it, the police chief was so shocked that he was speechless. Luke was worried because children were dying in the research institute every day. Luke hoped that the police chief would immediately send someone to level the place. However, the police chief had his own worries. To break through the defense force of the research institute, at least an elite special forces team was needed. Relying on 3 policemen in the station was impossible. The police chief had a political agent who was familiar with the state. Officer Reynolds stayed behind to guard and was about to take Tim and Luke away when Reynolds suddenly pulled out his gun and pulled the trigger. Seeing his old boss who had worked with him for 20 years fall in a pool of blood, this police officer was also very helpless. But he had received money from the research institute, so he had no choice but to help them cover up the crime. After handcuffing Tim and Luke to the chair, Reynolds hurriedly called Trevor. Trevor asked Reynolds to guard the scene and not let anyone enter or leave the police station. They would arrive in 30 minutes. Unexpectedly, the leader of the team this time was the female principal Sigsbee. She was proficient in wearing the uniform of a federal agent. Usually, problems that could not be solved by simple killing had to be personally addressed by Sigsbee. In the police station, Tim was handcuffed, but he did not sit and wait for death. While Reynolds went to deal with the body of the police chief, Tim signaled Luke to use his telekinesis to get a paperclip to open the handcuffs. However, Luke was so confused at the moment that he could not concentrate on using this ability. Tim told Luke to take a deep breath and think about his friends waiting to be rescued in the research institute. Luke calmed down and focused on activating his ability. The paperclip on the table seemed to be pulled away by an invisible force. Sure enough, it flew to the two people's feet. Tim had just picked it up when Reynolds was panting and returning to the lobby. The two acted as if nothing had happened. When Reynolds went out to pick up Sigsbee and returned to the room, Tim and Luke had already uncuffed and escaped. At this time, Tim had taken Luke to the convenience store at the gas station. Tim looked for the clerk and wanted to borrow a phone to make a call, but the phones in the whole town were out of service. Tim had once saved a store clerk from a robber's gun, so the clerk did not hesitate to hide Tim and Luke in a secret compartment in the warehouse. When Sigsbee asked, he lied that he had seen Tim driving towards the city. Sigsbee's subordinates searched the warehouse for a while, but did not find the two hiding in the secret compartment. When Sigsbee led the people away, the clerk even gave Tim a shotgun to thank him. Tim sincerely thanked him. Tim didn't expect that his unintentional action that year would receive such a reward, but as soon as the two of them ran out of the gas station, Luke suddenly felt a shock. At the same time, in the Research Institute's laboratory, Henry was conducting an experiment to activate the most devastating ability on Avery. Unexpectedly, when she was about to collapse, the burst of energy wave shattered the glass. The energy wave spread out. Even Luke, who was several kilometers away, felt it. Henry excitedly recorded the data. Avery's ability intensity alone surpassed the sum of all the children in the back district. Her existence almost overturned all theoretical research. They could rely on it to research new weapons. That night, Avery was taken to the basement of the back district. Kalisha, who was once enthusiastic and cheerful, had now turned into a lifeless corpse with empty eyes. Another girl who had arrived not long ago still looked a little alive. Avery didn't want to lose her good friend, so she used her ability to awaken Kalisha's remaining consciousness. She told everyone to persevere because the escape had scared the staff. Avery was sure that Luke would definitely find a way to save everyone. Moreover, he still had some trump cards that he hadn't used yet. In another development, Sigsbee was preparing to drive to the city when she suddenly realized something was wrong. When people are scared, they tend to run away, not to another place. She asked her subordinates to investigate whether Tim had any other acquaintances here. She immediately divided the team into two groups. One group went to the city to hunt for Tim, while she led people to stay in town to continue searching. At this time, Tim had brought Luke to his female colleague's house. This was the only person in town that Tim could trust. After a while of explaining, Wendy reluctantly believed this strange story. Luke kept adding that the force beside him could cut off the entire town's communication immediately. There was no one else except the Research Institute. But when she heard that Reynolds had shot the sheriff, Wendy was speechless with shock. In just 10 minutes, she had to hear shocking news. Tim immediately made his request. Wendy was a local, so she could definitely think of a way to get Tim and Luke out of town. Wendy had just nodded in agreement when suddenly there was a knock on the door. Unexpectedly, it was Reynolds who had led Sigsbee to the place. Wendy quickly hid the two of them in the storage room and calmly opened the door. Sigsbee didn't even bother to pretend. As soon as she entered the door, she started searching everywhere. Reynolds explained to Wendy that Tim had shot the sheriff and kidnapped a teenager. Tim is currently wanted by federal agents. Wendy pretends to be extremely surprised, but in her heart, she still firmly chooses to trust Tim. However, Reynolds notices that the storage room seems to have not been searched yet. When Reynolds gently turns the doorknob, a black gun is immediately pointed at his forehead. Tim is very restrained when he does not shoot on the spot. Tim asks Wendy to help him disarm the other two, because in his heart there are still many questions that need to be answered. However, when Wendy approaches Reynolds, he uses his hand to strangle her and turns her into a hostage. Wendy tries to escape. Tim is shot in the shoulder. Reynolds dies on the spot. Fighting is not Sigsbee's forte. She can only deny the crimes of the Research Institute. It wasn't until Luke brought up the video that Maureen had filmed before she died that he claimed to know all the crimes of the Institute. Sigsbee smiled sarcastically because what he knew was just the tip of the iceberg. The Institute had indeed extracted the children's abilities to plan many perfect assassinations, but the key was who were the targets. The private plane that crashed not long ago had Senator Mark sitting inside. If he had lived another 9 years, this fanatic warmonger would have become the Secretary of Defense. He would have convinced the president to launch a nuclear strike on Kim Jong-un's house. When the missile passed through Russian airspace, it would have been mistakenly identified as an attack. This would have caused a global nuclear war. That disaster would have claimed the lives of billions of people. Although all this sounds crazy, among mutants, in addition to their telepathy and telekinesis, there are also a very few people who can predict future. And the real purpose of establishing the Research Institute is to eliminate the key figures who could cause future apocalypses. In 70 years, they have used this method to prevent more than 500 potential disasters. Although this action will cause a part of mutants mutants to die tragically. In return, it is the stable life of billions of people. Sigsbee feels that this is a very good deal. She even thinks of herself as a hero who saves the world. Luke activates his sensory ability and confirms that Sigsbee is not lying. However, Tim thinks that this is just her personal opinion. If she really wants to save the world, why not publicize the existence of the research institute? But Sigsbee revealed an even more heartbreaking truth. The reason Tim left the city for this small town was because he had illegally shot a teenager who was about to massacre others with a gun. In essence, his approach and that of the institute were the same, sacrificing the minority to save the majority. But this behavior in many cases was not accepted by the majority of people. Even the law did not accept it. A few words from Sigsbee made it impossible for Tim to refute, and it also pushed everyone into a dilemma. In the end, should they let those children die tragically or accept the risk of the world being destroyed to expose the crimes of the institute? In the end, the mutants dared to rise up to take revenge on the managers who had tortured them. But when they merged, the destructive power was equal to a mini-atomic bomb. The director revealed the purpose of the institute's existence. It turned out to be sacrificing some people to save the world. After Tim heard it, his moral torment was relieved because he had met too many people who used the name of protecting world peace to do shady things. So whether this institute was right or wrong, he still decided to go public. Luke nodded in agreement beside him, but just as they were about to leave, Luke felt Avery's familiar voice calling. It turned out that Avery had been sent to the rear area and was about to participate in an assassination mission like any other mutant. Avery had also prepared an extremely detailed countermeasure plan. Avery's assassination target tonight was an important female politician in the country. Henry's original plan was for Avery to create a car accident. That way, he could kill someone without leaving a trace. However, Avery's domineering nature was beyond imagination. Despite wearing a power amplifier, Avery still maintained his consciousness. Taking this opportunity, he not only woke up his friends who were still dreaming, but also connected with the mutants who were imprisoned in other places. Then the situation suddenly changed. The assassination target passed through the danger zone safely. As for the guard who wanted to teach Avery a lesson, his body did not listen. His two hands automatically held the electric baton and stuffed it straight into his mouth. At the same time, in the secret room in the rear area, the mutants who were in a coma gradually woke up. Facing the prison guards who often tortured them, they did not hesitate to activate their superpowers. Trevor saw this scene on the monitor and immediately rang the alarm for the entire institute. He also did not expect the normally docile mutants to suddenly become so violent. Avery knew that this was only the first step. How to escape from this research institute was the core problem. He had discussed the escape route with them before, through the iron door to enter the secret room. The group reunited with their exhausted teammates. This further proved that this research institute was full of lies. They had always said that the children who completed the mission would be sent home after a simple recovery period. They used the access card on the guard and opened one security door after another. However, Trevor quickly discovered their plot and ordered all the electricity to be cut off, making it impossible for them to open the door. Avery tried to use his ability to break the door, but the hardness of the iron door was beyond imagination. They began to panic because being trapped in this sealed tunnel was not a good thing. Avery tried to call for help from Luke, but the distance was too far, so the signal was intermittent. In fact, Trevor was much more sinister. He knew that these mutants were a time bomb, so he had to find a way to suppress them. A guard came up with a little trick, mixing bleach and cleaning detergent. This could create a large amount of CO2. In a closed tunnel, this method was very effective. Trevor immediately sent someone to prepare. On the other side, Luke also felt his friend's predicament. They had originally planned to go to the police station to report the crimes of the research institute first, but it seemed that they had to change their plans. However, both Tim and Sigsbee thought that going to the police station to call for help was still a safer option. Just relying on a few of them to go to the research institute would fail. The director was still trying to tell Tim to look at this beautiful world, because who knows, it might turn to dust soon. Tim was extremely angry when he heard this. He scolded her that if she had free time, she should think of a way to protect the children. She was about to do it again when Tim pushed her straight out the door. After some hesitation, Luke still decided to go to the research institute first because his friends were in danger. However, Wendy was still more rational. She thought that they could not be opponents of the entire research institute. Luke did not want to advise anymore. He planned to charge into the research institute alone. In the end, Tim was convinced by Luke's determination. Tim decided to fight with Luke. After discussing for a while, they finally came up with a plan. They grabbed the director's phone and called Trevor. At first, Luke planned to use the director to exchange for the children's freedom, but Trevor made an unexpected request. It turned out that among the children in the research institute, Luke was the only one who had the ability to to see the future. This was a genius that only appeared once every few decades. Trevor asked Luke to return to the research institute in exchange for the freedom of the other children. Luke also did not expect that he would be more valuable than Avery. Luke agreed to this request. Tim was sure that this was a trap, but Luke already had a countermeasure. On the other side, Trevor really had no intention of keeping his promise. He told his subordinates to continue mixing the medicine, wait for his order to release poison gas into the tunnel immediately. He took the initiative to call the final boss. Meanwhile, Avery, who was trapped in the tunnel, also felt that something bad was coming, but he was sure that Luke would definitely save everyone. At this time, Luke's group was about to arrive at the research institute. Tim took the initiative to hold Wendy's hand. Both of them knew that this time was very dangerous, but for the safety of the children, they had to save people. They quickly went to the agreed transaction location. The soldiers from the institute had been waiting there for a long time. Even the final boss was watching them through the camera screen. Tim spoke first and asked where the kids were. Trevor said he had to see Luke first before handing over the people. Trevor finally stopped pretending. He took out his walkie-talkie and muttered a few words. A group of soldiers ambushed from the bushes suddenly rushed out and surrounded the police car in a flash. And of course, Tim became a prisoner. But the most surprising thing was that the main character Luke was not in the car. At this time, Luke had already crossed the mountain behind and circled outside the institute's yard. Luke crawled through the familiar dog hole and returned. The director had just been freed when she cursed Trevor's stupidity. If Luke and Avery joined forces, they would definitely link up with the mutants in other institutes, and the energy that would be released would be beyond everyone's imagination. At this time, Luke had already sneaked into the rear of the institute and saw the empty hospital bed. He knew that the children had successfully escaped. He used the key to open one layer of protective door after another, but when he encountered the electronic door, he was helpless. Fortunately, the distance between Luke and Avery was close enough. The two could communicate telepathically. Luke told Avery to gather everyone's power to break through the knife line of these ordinary people at once. Avery quickly stood up and followed. The mutants in other places also quickly felt the call for help and activated their superpowers together. The door in front of Luke was bent by an invisible force. Luke rushed into the tunnel and successfully reunited with Avery and the others. But there was still another iron door blocking the way. Avery was about to repeat his old trick. Although the research institute was built extremely solidly, it could not withstand the destructive energy from all over the world. Trevor also realized that something was wrong, so he ordered his subordinates to release the poison gas. At the same time, Luke's group finally broke the iron door. Seeing the poison gas rolling in, Luke urged everyone to leave quickly, but the mutants were exhausted and even confused. They had to rely on Avery to keep their sanity. Avery told Luke and the others to go first, and you will stay to protect them. Luke was run out of the tunnel by his friends with an axe. The research institute was shaking as if it was about to collapse due to the energy shock. They ran to the cafeteria to pick up the still bewildered George. Until they reached the backyard, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. In another development, Trevor wanted to run away, but it was too late. The floor collapsed, sending him to the rubble. The evil man finally got his just end. The director looked at the falling ceiling, her eyes filled with fear. Only Luke felt that this level was not enough. This damn research institute should have been turned into dust a long time ago. He took the initiative to contact the other mutants. Everyone joined forces, and the entire research institute immediately collapsed. Taking advantage of the chaos, Tim grabbed the gun and turned the tables in the blink of an eye. The final boss saw this scene through the camera, but he was still extremely calm and made a phone call. He asked the cleaning team to come to the scene immediately. It seemed that this was not the first time he had dealt with this kind of thing. After hanging up, he ran out to the yard to play happily with his two grandchildren. Meanwhile, Luke's group looked at each other. Now they are free, but they also have a responsibility on their shoulders. Soon, the mother and daughter will also arrive. They will continue to fight the dark forces to the end. Surprisingly, the director is still alive. She is holding a USB in her hand. Perhaps it is evidence of the Institute's crimes over the years. It seems that this is a scenario of reformation, or it could also be a trump card for her to threaten the boss in case she is retaliated against. Above is the entire content of the first season of the Research Institute. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, and see you in the next videos.